Ayin Beis, middle of chapter Kuf Mem Hey, 145. The early parts of Discourse 37. He's talking about Nekuda Sefirah and Partzuf. That in every Sefirah, the evolution, let's call it the anatomy of a Sefirah. The anatomy of a Sefirah is that it begins with a Nekuda point, develops into a Sefirah, which is a sphere, an entity, and then a Partzuf, a full structure. So it's really the anatomy of everything works that way. Everything begins with a point, then it expands outward, and you can see like a seed, and then suddenly you can start seeing the seed begins to take shape as it turns into blossoms, or a child developing. At some point you start seeing the body, and you see the arms and the legs, the vital organs, and so on. And a partzuf is once it's a full-blown structure. All this is coming to explain the difference between two amshachas. One is like Asis, one is like Cyrus. Asis transmits through letters, another is a transmission through very narrow strands, let's call it narrow channels, like the strands of hair. And all this is coming to explain the difference between the amshacha l'tzedek Atzilus and amshacha l'tzedek Biyah. What is necessary to build Atzilus, the world of Atzilus, and what is necessary to build the world of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, which in turn is coming to explain, continuing to explain that which we've discussed, the Avos HaMatan Torah, the difference between drawing into the world the structural energy into the structure and that which is beyond the structure. So we learned about Nekuda, and when I went to the Kitzur, actually it does appear that the Keser in every sphere is the Nekuda. However you explain it, it's always the Keser within it. Two explanations, whether it's desire or it's the actual Nekuda that is the core element of Chachma or Chesed, its ability, so to speak, its potential. And then he goes over to Sefirah, which we're in the middle of learning right now. So Sefirah, before we read it inside, is about how this Nekuda, how this point, which is just the core element of it, whether it begins to turn into 10 spheres within that sphere itself. So in other words, if you talk about Chachma, let's say, the Nekuda of Chachma would be like Chachma Sheba Chachma. That's it. The sphere of Chachma would be Bina Sheba Chachma, Das Sheba Chachma. Here's Kesser, so let's not say Das. Chesed Sheba Chachma, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Heid, Yised, Malchus, and Chachma. Then you have a full sphere. It's easier to understand probably in Chesed than it is in Chachma, because Chachma itself is so difficult to grasp. So let's say in Chesed Sheba Chesed would be the core element of Chesed. What is Chesed? Chesed is, like he says here, to use his words, Haratzon is Chesed, the desire. Oy, Shumasat Etzem Nekudas Haradiva Sheba Lev. Bicholta this Chesed b'chol min Chesed. If we didn't have that faculty called Chesed, we wouldn't have the capacity to do Chesed to another. It's a faculty. So just like our eyes allow us to see, and our ears allow us to hear, the faculty of Chesed allows us to do Chesed. That's the Nekuda of Chesed, the Nekuda. But that's not a full-blown midah. Now the question is, when you start implementing, what does this Chesed look like? So now Chesed needs to have Gvura Sheba Chesed. Because Gvura Sheba Chesed tells Chesed, you don't give everywhere, you don't spoil, you can destroy. Think of it like Gvura is Kshamim. So rain, water is Chesed. But if it came down in buckets, like the Gemara in Tainus says, Rev Teva ein yechem lekabel. It will flood the fields, and the Rev Teva. So there's a Chesed, but a Chesed that's not monitored, that's a Chesed that doesn't have a structure. That's just unbridled Chesed. So Gvura Sheba Chesed, one explanation, there's probably more, that Gvura Sheba Chesed is that Chesed is tempered, is channeled, who you're giving it to, and so on. Then there's Tiferes Sheba Chesed, and then there's Netzach. Each one has its component. Actually, I wrote that in my book on Sefirah Seimer, it does exactly that. Because we say in Sefirah Seimer, we don't just say Chesed. The 7 weeks, not just 7 weeks, every week has 7 days. Every Sefirah has 7 Sefirahs in it. That means that each one, for it to be a full-bodied Sefirah, a healthy Sefirah, like for example, what's the Tiferes Sheba Chesed? Is the compassionate Chesed. I'm not going to explain that right now. Netzach shebechesed is the endurance in chesed, and hoyt shebechesed, the humility in chesed. This is one application. Obviously, there's more. So the bottom line is, a Sefirah, as he's going to explain now, is not just the nekuda. The nekuda, therefore, is like if someone say, describe to me chachma. Chachma is a spark of an idea. But so that's the nekuda of chachma. That's what he calls it, nekuda sa chachma. But if you want to explain to me the Sefirah of chachma, chachma's got a lot of dimensions in it. So I said, chachma is the hardest one to understand because we have to understand 10 spheres in a nekuda, which is always difficult to do because it's hard enough to understand the nekuda, the point. But the bottom line is that a Sefirah is a fully functional element, not just the point. So if you would say the headline of chachma is the spark, the headline of bina is the nekuda sabina is comprehension, is a nar, is a recheves hanar. It's expanded on the development of something. But if you want to really understand the Sefirah in its full sense, you need to, the anatomy of it, you need to break it down into 10 parts, which is what he's going to not explain at length. That's why I'm elaborating. But he says it b'kitzur. But that's where the word Sefirah now is. So after nekuda, he goes, now what is nekuda? So now he goes, the second line from the bottom on page 281, says like this. After finishing nekuda, so he keeps using nekudas nedivas havlev. The Sefirah, this is element 2, his galus ha-tes Sefirah shebechol Sefirah. Why does he say tes? Because the nekuda is the 10th. The chochma shebechachma, or the chesed shebechesed, that's the 1. Then the tes Sefirah shebechol Sefirah makes the Sefirah into, that's the galus. So it's all being revealed from what? From the nucleus, as we discussed. So it's all there in the nucleus, in the core. Which is, I think, the reason that he added a second explanation. Remember, first he said kesed, the desire, both by chochma and chesed, and then he added that it's the thing itself, because in the desire, it's very hard to break that into 10. The desire to do chesed, yes, you could explain it, but it's still, it's geschmacker if you say the nekudas of nidivas halev, that nekuda, that nucleus, that seed develops, you have 9 other dimensions. That's asvara that I'm saying, why he didn't suffice with the first interpretation, just desire. Because desire is a desire to do it. Okay, once a desire to do it, then you develop it. You can't really say in the desire there's 10 spheres. You could. The truth is you could. You could say in keseh shebechachma, which is the nekud of chachma, the desire, there's 10 elements. But it's closer when you say it's the nekud of chachma itself, the ability to comprehend. You follow what I'm saying? It's like almost... It's again stages, it's very subtle stages. Because the desire for something is a bit outside of it. The thing itself, the nekud itself, it's like the desire for the seed is different than the seed itself that has all the spheres in it. Just distinguishing how I would separate the two. But as I said, it does appear from the kitzur that kesed is both elements. Because you don't have to say kesed desire. Kesed could also be the core element of it, even though I'm laying it back and forth. There's a swara lakan. Because if it's the kesed shebechachma, then what's chachma shebechachma? In the second explanation, chachma shebechachma. So you have to get into in the nekud of the nekud. Okay, let's go now. The Sefirah who is galus ha-tes Sefirah shebechol Sefirah. So we said the tes Sefirah. So the best example again is you see a seed fertilized child. At the beginning it's 1 cell, 2 cells, 10 cells. It multiplies. What's it called? It breaks it.
Metastasized.
That you say in negative. I don't know if you're saying positive too.
You're saying that it grows, right?
Metastasize, I think, is used in the. Maybe. No, there's a word. They duplicate. The cells split. They split. That's the word. They split. Okay. Metastasize is a word I think is used in the illness part, but maybe I'm not positive. We don't have our Google searchers today here. Okay. So you see, in the beginning, you only see what you see is a speck, is a nucleus. But then, in the first quarter, whatever happens in the first 3 months, the first trimester, second trimester, you start seeing actual development. It's clearly coming from there. Just an example of like Sefirah as opposed to Nekuda, just to give it. Then he goes like this. Now this is where it gets very subtle. So he's going back now to Chachma. He's going to explain now what we spoke about what the Nakuda is in Chachma. What's the Sefirah in Chachma? So he's going back to the words he used back in chapter Kuf Lamed Ches and Kuf Lamed Tes. Nakudas HaSkola. What's the word he used? Nakudas HaSkola. Let me just get it back here. So Chachma is distinct. So Nakuda HaSkola, like he said here, Nakuda Atzmi is the Chachma, Nakudas HaSkola. So it says like so. Nakuda HaSkola. Let's give the parentheses a minute. The parentheses itself answer parsha, and just read it a minute. Which I think it's almost impossible to read actually, because I think what's outside the parentheses is a hemshech to the parentheses in this case. But let's try it. Nakuda HaSkola. V'akeich sheyesh ba nakuda bezeh shetov l'idei asag shezeh b'chinas havem b'chachma. So this is the Sefirah already, and the nigun was wrong. You have to read like this. And what is this? Galsa Tesfirah Shabbesichal Sefirah. That's a Kamei Nakudas HaSkola. Nakudas HaSkola is now one of the Tesfiras. I think that's like Chachma Shebechachma maybe even. Because now he's not talking, remember he said before the Nakuda was, he said the Nakuda Atzmi is the Chachma Shebeyicholte Lave. Before he was speaking, what is Beyicholte Lave? This is maybe the answer. Staka Chachma Shebechachma. I got it. So the Nakudas HaSkola, remember here, let's do his words, Diuk. Masha biyicholte lovei al kol dvar chachma. Whatever comes his way, he'll be able to handle. Even though Achshav, like he said, the thing has not been presented to him, but Masha biyicholte. Now we're talking Nakudas HaSkola. Now we're actually talking, the process has begun. Now we're talking Sefirah. What's the Sefirah? First is Nakudas HaSkola. That's Chachma Shebechachma, seemingly. Then goes next. The next thing is that this nakuda that is it hasn't the power to come to a comprehension. This is b'chinas havem b'chachma. So we're talking now. Exactly. The bina shebechachma. Umida shebechachma. He's spelling out the Tesfiras. It's very clear. Umida shebechachma. What is that? We discussed earlier the inclinations. Remember in chachma there's also midah shebechachma. It was called Yisrael Saba. It was that tia, right? In Chachma. Shari gam b'Chachma yesh ba midas, because also in Chachma there's midas as we discussed. Rak she'enim nekarim klal. They're not yet distinguishable. They're not distinct. Then comes v'kayach ha'izgala sheb'Chachma.
That's Nehi.
That may be Nehi or Malchus.
That's Nehi.
Yeah, probably Nehim. Yeah. So we see right here he spelled out in Chachma itself. So clearly here it's talking Chachma Shebechachma. This is for sure. Nakudas HaSkola for sure not Kesser Shebechachma. So it looks like Chachma Shebechachma, Bina Shebechachma, Midas Shebechachma, and the Izgalus, which was like we spoke about Nehi. That is applies. I would say it's also Malchus because Malchus is also Gili. Maybe not. Okay, probably. Another way to explain the Sefirah of Chachma. Sefirah now, not Nakuda. Gam Yesh Leimer. Shezevin Haisamtu Shebechachma. Okay, what is that? Samtu Shebechachma is the Chifan Hecher. That this Sefirah now, not Nakuda, is the resonance in Chachma, the resonating truth. Or Midas Shebebchinas Samtus, and the Midas in the level of the Samtus. So Chmoy Shasik Rav, Chmoy Shasik Magmachon is Barlei Perikul Famedei. Oh boy! So he's going even more dakuzdik. That in the Sefirah there's the Samtus, and there's the Midas in the Samtus, right?
He's saying basically the whole Chachma is Samtus.
Right.
Parts of Sefirah of Chachma is
not parts. Say don't say parts. Say Sefirah because so one second. So he's saying now. So in the Midas Shebechachma, remember we said there's a unique element. There's a resonance that Shasik Rav, you can't explain it. Remember, not Bina. Midas Shebebina Tfuna could be explained right here. Let's go back a moment because I think it's very helpful. Not Reish Samach.
No, page Reish Samach.
Page, yeah, the bottom there, right? Yeah. It says there like this. So what does he say? The midas there, he's talking not the spilus and seichel, he's talking about netiyah, the inclinations. So he says, so he says like this. Okay, fine. I'm skipping. Okay, he's already coming. Seichel is coming already. Chachma, in other words, is sensing already an element of Chesed Gvura. ובחוכמה בחינת מידס ובחוכמה הוא איך שמצד היסמתוס השכל בו המידה לחסד ולדין על יסר או זסד וכידוע בעניין שסק רב שלא בוץ הטעם והשגל יסר excuse me ובבינה בחינת המידס שבו okay, I skipped a line. אך לא יוכל להם להפך משזיך למטה כך מזן סמתוס שבשכל ובבינה בחינת המידס שבו שבהשגס העניין בעצם בו ידי עתיע לחסד ולדין. As we explained then, was also not so simple. Because what's really the difference? So the answer is one is in his samtus. In other words, because you can ask a question. When a person is in the process of comprehending something, okay, so there's a state we spoke about seichel where he's not yet leaning in any direction. Right? It's going in all possible ways to explain something. Correct? Then he comes to a point where he starts leaning. Thank you. He leans. So we discussed then. Remember, here's a question. The process goes. Chachma is the spark. Bina is the explanation. In the middle of the process of Bina is where you come to are you inclining or not inclining in a certain direction. Where's their midas and Chachma? Chachma has already been. Chachma is the beginning of the process. You follow what I'm asking?
Of course, that's the whole.
That's why he says that even in the process, let's say where a judge is like or Shaman Hillel, they're in the middle of their Hizbananus, or anyone, any shafet, and they're coming back and forth. So then, when they're ready to come to a conclusion, when they're starting to lean toward Chesed or Gvura, to Din, to Zakai or Chayiv, that this person is merits or doesn't merit. So he says there's two elements. There's a certain resonance, a sense. We discussed it then. I'm just elaborating again because it's negated to what we're learning here. There's a certain sense from Tzad Chachma that this is right or wrong and he can't fully explain it. And then there's Bina is a full explanation. Bina is Midas Bina is basically Bina could explain it. But in other words, there's a type of intellectual intuition or sense, instinct. And there's so now let's go back to here. Just wanted to go over that again because what does he say? He's definitely referring to what he spoke about there. So what's Zehu Inyan? The Nakuda, in other words. And the Sefirah. So the Sefirah is referring not just to Chachma and there's Bina Shebechachma and Midah Shebechachma. It's also that in the Sefirah it's also referring to the Samtus Shema. Even the Samtus also has Midas in it. Oh, that's the Chiddush here. No, you could argue that the Nakuda is the Nakuda Samtus, but once it becomes a full-blown Sefirah, yeah, we need Bina to understand, we need Midas to incline, but who says it's connected to the Nakuda Samtus of Chochmah? You could say it's only connecting to the Bina. Bina has inclinations. That's what he's saying, that also in the Samtus Chochmah you see there's Midas in it. Shosik Rav, that's the Vart. Which we just read. And then comes v'nekudus haskalo u'pchinas hanochas sichla shaba is another element. So there's a samta sheba chachma which also includes midas sheba chachma.
In 130 in chapter.
What's that? Was that nekudus haskalo would be like chachma sheba seichel u'pchinas hanochas sichla shaba u'kameshon is barlei peri kuflam et ches. What does he add with this? This line v'nekudus haskalo. What's he adding here? No, in addition to Samtus. So in other words, in addition to the Samtus, there's also the Kudus HaSkala and Hanochas Sichlis. Shabbat. Bottom line is, okay, I understand what he's saying. That in other words, not just Sefirah means all the 9 spheres, it's talking about everything Chachma has. He's giving everything it has. When you talk about Chachma, you're not just talking about one element. You're talking about Chachma, the 9 spheres in it. You're talking about Havain b'chachma, you have Midah shebechachma, Gilish shebechachma. Then you have the Samta shebechachma, you have Midah shebezeh, you have Nekudas haskala and the Hanachas sichlis. All this makes Chachma a full-blown Sefirah. That's the point. As opposed to the Nekudas HaChachma we spoke before, the Nekuda itself is either the Kesed, the desire, or it's the element of the capacity. The capacity, Loveil Kol Davar. Okay. So in a way you could say, it's like when you look at it, let's say a powerful part of a machine, the powerful part of the machine has in it its capacity. Like you could say, that a car can drive 190 miles an hour, though it's not driving it. Just that's its capacity. And then when it starts functioning, it has a whole bunch of elements to it. This shtickle machine. That's the point. Okay. Not that sounds more complicated, I think, on the paper than it actually is.
No, I remember
sometimes the other way around. Because it's like it's a Sefirah. That's a Sefirah. It's a full functioning entity. Yeah.
I remember us grappling with the fact of his amsus and nachasichlis was higher.
But if you go back to Mem Aleph and Beis, it's very clear. In Mem Aleph he says clearly, Samta Sichli is Riyah, and Riyah is higher than really. Riyah is not. He says clearly, Samta Sichli is. It's part of Chochmah, but it's not in Hasaga. Hanocha is in Hasaga in Chochmah.
Yeah, nachasichlis. He says.
Yeah, the Nachasichlis is Hasaga in Chochmah, and Riyah is not in Hasaga, not in the comprehension part.
Riyah is his amsus.
Riyah is Yisamsis. Pure Riyah is like when you see something. So he brings there from Radizal that he was able to see. What did he say there? He was able to see something that would take 80 years to explain. So it's a sight. It's like seeing. It's like for example, you see a beautiful sight. So it's not Amunah. It's definitely in the world of Chachma, but it's a Chachma that is. It's a vision. A vision is a whole different reality. You have to look at Mem Aleph and Mem Beis. It's very clear there.
But is that a different...
Then there's another thing, Hanachas Sichlis. But that, on the contrary, that just tells you there's a lot of levels in Chachma. That's the point.
What's Shasik Rab?
Shasik Rab is the Midas in the Hisamtus. In the Midas in Chachma, what he said, we just read it, is the Midas in Chachma. He wants to show and demonstrate how in a Sefirah there's, as I said, there's a point, and then there's a whole bunch of elements in it, even in Chachma. Even the Chachma is just a point itself, relatively. It has a whole bunch of functional elements. He's not elaborating. He's just referring to all the levels we learned earlier. So if you really dissected it, it would be a slow process. You have to painstakingly go. There's Nekudas Askola. I think he looks like he's distinguishing between Nekudas Askola and Hanachas Sichlis, which, if I recall, is the same thing. If I recall, I don't remember him saying a difference between them. Yeah, well, the Nekudas Haskalah is just the Nekuda itself, that you have a point. And that Nachas Sichlis is the leg that he said. It's the leg tzach. Okay, fine. Right. Look, to really understand the sugi of Chachma Bina, or this Chachma, you need this chapter, is referring back to chapter, what we just said, Kuf Lamed Hey through Kuf Lamed Ches, and you have to go back to Mem Aleph Mem Beis. It's a sugya. It's like like in Gemara. Sometimes they get back to something 5 dafim later. This is a sugya. You really have to, if you want to learn it properly, you have to go to all those, and he's using them all. He's using all the elements as he sees fit. I think it's. I mean, if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer. I think it's more or less. Look, they're all abstract ideas, but I think it's pretty clear. I'm pretty clear, at least this level, this stage. It's going to get more complicated, of course.
Like the way he's going to degradations. He's starting with his amsus of Chachma, which would be the point, which would be the Nekuda. Then it would be Midas, and then it would be Nekudas Haskalah. B'chinas Hanacha would be like Nehi or the Nehim. The way he did it.
Yeah, but he doesn't spell it out. You could say, or he could just say he's just explaining different components without really
leveling them.
It's very possible that it could be that way, no?
No, because the problem is if you say Hanachas Sichlis is Nehi, that's for sure not. Hanachas Sichlis is high. Nehi was how you apply it. It's for sure not Nehi. I can't tell you for sure not what you're saying, but it's too little data. Okay, let's put it this way to be conclusive. No, let me put it this way. If we learn it again and you go different places and you see something that he says, you may come back here and understand better. I don't know how much you could. I think it's almost like a period. He's just bringing all the elements into it. It's not so clear exactly every.
Because before he did that, that's
I know exactly what you're saying. Going from Chachma through Malchus or Nehi, right? Yeah. I think what he wants to do here was really connect it to what we learned earlier and also show how much is going on even in the world of Chachma. That's outside of a Nukud. There's that point of Shasik Rav. Yeah, clearly that there's another way to. Yeah.
The same thing.
Oh, I don't know if I would say that. I'll be honest, I don't know if that's the case. Okay, we move on. Look, the best way this would be expressed would be to put it on paper with some images, maybe some music in the background, like a PowerPoint, or what they have today is what they call Prezi, a new type of presentation. It's excellent. It's like a dynamic PowerPoint. You can magnify things and so on. It's like very good. Prezi. So to make a presentation of this, like from the word presentation.
Presentation now is Z.
Yeah, because it's like
It's a word.
It's a hip hop presentation.
No, it's all about you can't brand presentations, so you have to make a name. It's a good name, like Twitter. These things, Google. So to make it really good would be to take Chachma, dissect it literally into pieces, parts. And you'd have to really make this understandable, palatable. You have to explain how we relate to it. The problem is we're hardly body seichel. First, here we're talking about dissecting Chachma in its purest form. You relate to it but you really have to go back to think how you think. This is how we use our minds. So ultimately, he's explaining how we use our minds, or how we're supposed to use our minds, I should say. How we're supposed to use our minds.
How the mind is walking.
Yeah. How the mind works when it's at its best. So there's
If you're using it properly.
No. You're messing it up later, but in this Nakudas, that's a process.
The healthy, yeah, but he means to say the way God built it, not the way we. Yeah. Okay, now comes Partzuf. The Partzuf is going to be Lebedik and Freilach. Okay.
So this is all Nakuda.
Sefirah. So we did Nakuda was previous page. We did Sefirah. Now we're coming to Partzuf.
Why is it called Sefirah? Because it's like simple. The way.
No. Here it's called Sefirah. He doesn't say why it's called Sefirah. He just says Sefirah as opposed to Nakuda is the nucleus. Sefirah is the full-blown Chachma or Chesed. So he says clearly the test Sefirah when Chesed, the concept of Chesed is to give, but there's a Gvura Sheba Chesed, knowing how much to give. There's a Teferah Sheba Chesed. There's a Netzach Sheba Chesed. So that's a Sefirah. The Sefirah is when you talk about the whole entity in its fullest form. Partzuf now is how Sefirahs combine, and we're going to talk now to a whole. Well, I don't know. Let's see how he defines Partzuf. So Partzuf Partzuf means a face. A face really means a structure. You can say it's a configuration. It's a bunch. I mentioned a house compared to a room would be a Partzuf. Compared to a brick would be a Nakuda. A room would be a Sefirah in this case, an entity. And a house is not made of one room. It's made of many rooms. It's usually a configuration of different elements in a structure. That's what usually the definition of Partzuf. Like usually the Partzufim go. There's 5 Partzufim: Partzuf of Keser, Partzuf of Chochmah, Bina, Midas, and Malchus. There's 5 Partzufim generally speaking.
It's like a building, the material of the building in the building.
Yeah. So now he's going to explain Partzuf. Remember, Nekuda, Sefirah, Partzuf. It's 3 expressions from Eitz Chaim. I believe there's even a shard Nekuda, Sefirah, Partzuf. I'm not sure about that. Okay, ready? Here's Partzuf. As I said, the best way to also understand, think of it as a child. The conception, you have a nucleus, a cell. The cell splits. At some point it becomes a Sefirah. You start seeing the different elements. And then at some point it's a full-blown life. At the end of the gestation period, the pregnancy, and then a child is born. A child is a Partzuf. In that sense, and it all began with a Nakuda, developed into a Sefirah, and then into a Partzuf. All this comes back to God created existence in an orderly fashion, so for us to be able to retrace the steps, to see each step along the way, which allows us to identify where we're holding, where we're going, where we're coming from. How's that? Some people don't know where they're going or where they're coming from. Some people, if I'm going, whether I'm coming or going. Yeah, he mentioned it actually earlier.
5.
Keser, Chachma, Bina, Midas, and Malchus. Or more Keser, Chachma, Bina, Zah, and Nukva, if you want. Just a different name for Midas and Malchus.
And the Kruvim are Partzufim, the Nekes.
Yeah. Just gave my last class about that. Also with the Kruvim. Spreading their wings.
Is that 2 boy faces or a boy and a girl?
No, boy and a girl, according to Rashi. There's different opinions. Now, everyone's a boy and a girl, that's for sure. Question is, no. There's the Ramban from Medrash that says that it's Malachim. So there's not necessarily like what it says by Cheskel. Cheskel also had a vision of Kruvim. So there it's angels, not necessarily male, female.
So what's the Indian with the...
Sometimes it's Mashpia Makabel. The Rashi, which is the predominant interpretation, is faces of children and boy, girl.
But when the Romans came, they said, Re'u b'meim askim.
Yeah.
How are you explaining that?
No, the question is more than that. The question is that 40 years before the Beis Mikdash was Charav, Yishayahu was going as the Ayin together with the Kruvim and the Chafetz.
That's our Shaila,
How
yeah.
could it be that when the Romans came, they saw the Kruvim? They saw the Kruvim. There was no Kruvim there 40 years already.
You sure talking about the Romans, not the Babylonians? What you were talking? The Romans?
Matter, even the Babylonians.
The Romans? Are you sure? Is it Bayis Sheni or Bayis Rishon?
That's another question. That's a bigger question.
Even in Bayis Rishon, they were going as...
It says Mu'urim Zebazeh. When the Babylonians said by Bayis Rishon, they came in and they saw that they were facing one another. This is for sure Bayis Rishon. Bayis Sheni, the Adon was Nignas. There's a whole Mefarshim on this. Some say that the Adon was Nignas, but the Kapetus and that was still there. There's such an opinion also.
Never heard that.
There is a ship in it?
I think I saw it somewhere. It's talked about. This is not a.
The answer is... The Pasha's answer is that Shlomo Melech built another one.
Oh, they say there were arenas outside and stuff like that.
One, the Kruvim standing from the ground up, not on the other.
Yeah, that's another right. Yeah. I looked into it. There's in Torah Shleima.
Yeah.
In Torah Shleima, Kasha brings, I think, all the opinions. There's a lot of opinions on this. When it was Nignas, how it was Nignas, Allah Maisis, it was a whole thing. Yeah. Anyway, I just gave a whole class on the Kruvim, what it means, what's the significance. Like it's a very.
You emailed that?
Yeah. It's on YouTube. It's a class called exactly that, called the Cherubs. The title of the class is "Are You Spreading Your Wings?" I was very taken by the fact that the wings spread out or cover the whole kaperis. It's interesting. First of all, very rarely do you find engraving, especially in the Kodesh Kodashim. It's engraving of images. It's a very rare thing in Yiddishkeit. It's probably the only place. And real images are engraved. We don't engrave images that easily. Angels, not angels. You don't have that. And here, right on top of the...
Yes,
they were more like golems. They moved.
Huh?
They moved. I mean, it's not like...
No, but it was gold. They didn't move all the time. They moved miraculously at times.
They were alive. The expression was alive.
Yeah, but they were made out of solid gold. Let's put it this way. There was no soul in there.
No.
Okay.
No.
How they moved is another question.
The soul is the
That's in Cube.
No, but humans carved it out of the gold. It had to be carved out of the thing. It's a fascinating thing. I was just fascinated. So I decided to give a class. Spreading your wings. Listen, we're all busy. Are we spreading our wings or not?
So, how did you answer that?
So you have to listen to it. It's available. It's free. I went through the whole thing. There's a lot of opinions on the whole thing with the Kruvim. That's why I'm familiar with it. As I said, the Ramban, there's Rashi, there's other Mefarshim, there's Mashpia Makabel. Sometimes it says it's like a Mashpia Makabel. Why is it called Kruvim? You know why? From the word Kiravya. That a child is like a Rav. He's growing, Kiravya. Because children grow, they come from the word Rav, like Rav V'Godel. Like a Pri. Not my Taich. So the Tzemach Tzedek brings it from Mefarshim. That's the proof. It's children.
But that's an idea of Partsufim in Kodesh HaKodoshim.
Okay, good. So that's why I have a class on it. Check it out. It's under sugya. I don't know how. So now it's a Partsuf.
No, we're talking Partsufim.
Oh, Partsuf. Okay, first day.
So that's where it comes from.
Partsuf. After Nekuda Sefirah, Partsuf u'b'chinas abiyasha b'chol Sefirah. So Nekuda, we said, was just one point. Sefirah is the 9 spheres in each Sefirah. And what is Partsuf? Because the one itself is the Nekuda. It's 10 total.
Can't you speak the Nekuda is the Kesef?
So I just discussed this at length there. So however you twist it, the Kesef Shebachachim, and then there's 9 left. There's only 10 spheres. Then you don't count Das, so it's 9 more.
You don't count Das?
When you count Kesef, you don't count Das. There's only 10 spheres. Esa spheres v'lei echad asar. It says Kesef nimna eina Das nimna v'shedas nimna eina Kesef nimna. Beauty means Pnimis HaKesef you never count. Chetzenis HaKesef. So Partsuf u'b'chinas abiyasha b'chol Sefirah. So remember, now we have 9 spheres in each Sefirah, or total 10 in each. And now we have this Atzilus B'ri Yitzirah sheb'chol Sefirah. So it means a Sefirah has in it He's not talking here, I mistakenly said before, and I corrected myself. He's not talking about Sefirah where you have Chochmah, Bina coming together, or Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes coming together. He's talking here, in each Sefirah, you have a whole world. You have Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah. Not just other Sefirahs. You have entire worlds. Or you can say entire dimensions. Because it's not world, it's not planets. Let's put it this way. You'll never find them with a telescope, is what I'm trying to say. With a physical telescope. No, with a physical telescope.
We don't know.
With a spiritual telescope.
Maybe we don't have one.
We just learned
Atzilus, if someone finds Atzilus with a physical telescope, it's not Atzilus I want.
Of course not.
Just
what happened in Russia
don't
last
be so
week.
sure about that. Technologies can be maybe developed.
Okay, fine.
What happened in Russia last week, what the Rambam said about the Galgalim and all of these things, this meteorite that fell down, destroyed the whole city and Chabaras and everything. It's unbelievable.
They didn't
destroy it.
The windows, yeah. A lot of factories were broken.
Everything is relative.
What?
All the windows.
Destroyed. You mean Shviras like Teush destroyed?
It said
Was
the
it this?
force was like
10 times more than a
10 times
nuclear in Hiroshima.
Yeah, but it was high up.
Let's learn. Look, you sent me right. Who was Rab Nachman that said
Yeah.
that personally I'd prefer not to understand a God than to have a God that thinks like me. So that's what he said. Courtesy of Rabbi Moshe. So what are the four worlds in every Sefirah? Here we're going to go. The distinct and separate levels, and the distinct and separate levels in each Sefirah, muvdalis. This is a key word, muvdalis. They're separate. In other words, the Sefirah, in Sefirah, the 9 Sefirahs or the other Sefirahs within Chochmah, they're all, or Chochmah Chesed in any Sefirah, they're all part of the Sefirah. Here, the Sefirah is encompassing things that are outside, are not natural from that Sefirah itself. Basically, they're kinds of different worlds. Let me rephrase that. That is that it's encompassing a lot more than just what it needs for the Sefirah. Let's see what he says here. The 4 levels of Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir, Asiyah are 4 separate levels from one another. In other words, we're not talking now when you say Midah Sheba Chochmah, like he said, or Nehi, or Samtus, or the different things he said. There, you're talking if there's Gvura Sheba Chesed, or there's Bina Sheba Chochmah, you're not talking about Muvdal. Yes, they're not the same level, but you're talking here within the function of Hasaga, of comprehension. So, the Kudus HaChochmah is the point, and the Bina Sheba Chochmah is, like he put it, what did he say, what was Havem Bebina? Sheyesh Ben Nekudah B'zeh Shehevi Shetovei Lidei Hasaga. That in the Nekudah there's the capacity for it to ultimately come to be comprehended. Like he brings another Maimorim, an interesting expression. He says, even though Chochmah and Bina are 2 different roots, but when Chochmah starts working, you get an idea. How is it possible that the second you got the idea, you couldn't explain it to anybody? But a second later, you suddenly can explain it. So that's to prove that there's a Haven, there's a Bina in Chochmah. Because if there wasn't, Chochmah is just this is once a day? Huh? Why is that the case? Because or is it something I said? Huh? So there's the Bina Sheba Chochmah, means to prove that Chochmah already, even though it's a spark, it has in its capacity to begin to be developed. But that's all within Seichel. Now he's saying in the Sefirah there's 4 worlds. And the 4 worlds are very different. To say that there's an Atzilus in Chochmah, there's a Bria in Chochmah, there's a Yitzira in Chochmah, there's a Asiyah in Chochmah, is a big jump. Much different than saying there's Midas in Chochmah, there's Nehi in Chochmah, there's Bina Sheba Chochmah. Like that's what he's developing now here. By the way, I think this is where I began teaching in Yossi's house. Something I remember this. Wasn't recorded, however, those days. Huh?
I don't recall this.
Neither do I. This shows us how we learned it. That means next year you won't recall what we're learning now. That's a good sign. It means we're moving. So what does he say? So the 4 worlds are separate worlds. I should just add something which I think also, I wish they told it to us in nursery school, or at least the early stages when we learn Chassidus. We're taught this thing with the Sefirahs and the worlds. And I personally, till this day, I still have to struggle every time I hear the worlds. It reminds me of the worlds. I think it's planets. When it's really not at all that. The Sefirahs are like the DNA of an entity. They're like the DNA. The worlds are not really worlds. Well, the worlds are different dimensions. The worlds would be like the difference between a tzaddik and a beinoni. We call them two different worlds, but we don't mean them as worlds like planets. We mean them as totally two different dimensions. So DNA, we all have DNA. But what distinguishes you and I is not just our DNA, is that we are separate people with different roles and missions. Also some different DNA. So when you speak about spheres, you're really speaking about the molecules. Everything has molecules. But there's a very big difference between fire and water. Fire and water would be two different worlds. They wouldn't be of the same world. I mean, when I say it's of the same world, they are in the same physical world, but I mean to say they're two completely different properties. That's what he's going to say here. That's exactly that. There are four different worlds. So worlds, we really mean worlds. When you get older, you realize worlds, when they say worlds, you say the world of nature, the world of this. You don't mean a world as in a planet. You mean a world as an entity.
To say it's a world of difference.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
But these are all four separate existences.
That's not part of my world.
Even more than
Yeah.
fire, whole different existences. I mean, all the auras of each other. It's like completely a different.
Like in the olden days when there was a machlekes between Rabbanim. Today we don't have these things, but in the olden days, she say that Rav is in a different world than me. You know, that's that world. I'm in a different world. Just using an example that some people may relate to. Obviously, that's not in the kedusha necessarily.
That's what he said.
You said you told us the Maskell told you Maskell and Chassid over here. That the Rebbe was in a different world.
Yeah. Ich verstehe. As I verstehe on the worlds, you know. Like we said with God, I'd rather be in the Rebbe's world than in his world. Okay. So the Dal Madregas Nevdal is Emezeh. So he's going to explain now. Again, not at length, because he's relying on things that said earlier. So this is a little dense, so we just have to read it slowly. Atzilus nivdal be'erech mebiyah. Atzilus is separate relative from biyah. That Atzilus are alikus mamish. Atzilus is a pure divinity. Nashenkin biyah im b'chinas yesh v'dover. Biyah is already a yesh v'dover, and not yesh as we know it, a selfish narcissist. But yesh v'dover meaning you can't call it pure alikus. It's already has a sense of self, if you want to put it that way. Where Atzilus has no sense of self, Atzilus is has a self, has an entity, but it's a likus. Biyah is the mitzias, the yesh v'davar. Ulechein nimshel Atzilus
Atzilus.
Chachma bina das, but it's divine. It's Eibish's chachma, the Eibish's bina. It's like the Merkava. The others were entity; they existed. But 24/7, all they were a channel of the Merkava for what God wanted to be. Rabbi Hillel, it's a Geleit Shlofen. So he's like you could say is B'riyah. And the Alter Rebbe fell asleep. It said before Shabbos, the Alter Rebbe would fall asleep because he was Bedug Mishalom Ayla.
Said it, no?
I think the Alter Rebbe, they say. Isaiah B'Gdenker.
Rabbi Hillel was the Alter Rebbe.
Rabbi Alter passed away right after Rabbi Hillel came at him gesagt, B'sechta Erchin, Naim German.
It says
One second, let me just say. And B'riyah is completely wants to do what God wants, but it's an entity that now wants. Yeah, like that. So Afsharis HaMetzias, we learned earlier, that B'riyah is not Metzias, but it's Afsharis. It's the beginning of the emergence of something that is independent. It's not Hepech, it's not opposite of God. But you can't call it a pure channel of Elokus.
When it says the parts of the spheres, Abiyash,
Sefirah.
are they talking about all the spheres?
Yeah, every sphere has.
Not only the Atzilus, all of them.
When we talk Atzilus, with spheres, we're talking in Atzilus now.
We're only talking Atzilus. Yeah.
Oh no! I don't know. He's not. When you say spheres, generally speaking, in Atzilus, spheres in its purest form. But spheres are spheres. If the spheres in Atzilus have it, the spheres of Asiya have it.
Very common.
It's the same spheres in Asiya are the same spheres of Atzilus. They're just with many more garments. There's no 40 spheres. Remember, there's always 10. It's just different places where these 10 are. Look, you could have 10 faculties. You can use them for very lofty things. You can use them for very not lofty. We're always talking about 10 spheres. From the 10 hidden spheres, all the way to the 10 spheres in our existence are the same 10 spheres. It's just infinitely distance between their role and function. But you're talking about the same. It's like saying, a lakus is a lakus.
I don't think everybody knows that.
Huh?
I don't think everybody knows that.
Well, so I'm stating here for the record. You have to, for sure, not your question. It's like saying the lakus that's revealed, the minimal in our lives on earth, is a different lakus than Lifnei Tzimtzum. That's the lakus. The question is where it's coming from. Obviously, it's deeply diminished, and Tzimtzum and concealed, and all the levels. We are B'Tzelem Elokim. You know, when you look in the mirror, not that you should look in the mirror, but look in the mirror, your face and your body is created in God's image. Did you know that? It's not a theory, it's actual. And even though you look a little like your parents, but your parents were also created in God's image. Who created the first image?
Which doesn't
Sfas
mean
b'sfas asuya.
It's not the physical image.
I don't know what you mean, but why not the physical too? The fact that but that's what's your answer to that?
My answer is that Sefirah means the dimension, the levels. 10 different.
It actually says in Sefirah that the fact 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Not correct what you're saying. It's the physical image. Not that, but we didn't say God became physical. That's another shayla. That's a kasha. If you look in Perek Gimel, I think, or Perek K, what is it? He asked this question right at the beginning of Ayin Beis, in the Shalom, right here. Perek K, the bottom of page Ches. How could you say Tzura D'Musa? Tzelem Elokim, En Leid D'Musa Guf V'Lei Guf. It's a booster kasha. But he didn't make it. Human being is not the Ruchnis, and what's the point? A Malach, for example, is Ruchnis, but it's not B'Tzelem Elokim. The human being is Gashmis, is B'Tzelem Elokim. What that means is, primarily, doesn't say anywhere, so it says Malachim were created either day 2 or day 5. Right? There's 2 opinions, but it doesn't say anywhere they were created. You need a raya that someone is created Tzelem Elokim, not Fakert. Malachim Ashluchim of the Eibishter, they're not Tzelem Elokim. They could be far more dedicated because they don't have a Yitzhahara, they don't have a Bechira, etc. But a human being is created Tzelem Elokim. I'll give you the proof of it. An animal, what does it say in Chumash? An animal won't attack a human being. We see they do. So it says in Sefirah, because the animal won't attack because they see Tzelem Elokim on the face. The problem is, you could conceal it. By Daniel, they saw the Tzelem Elokim. It's a dover pasha. They won't attack.
They saw it. Maybe there are physical attributes that he's talking about.
Because it says in Chumash that it says that animals will not. Nothing will attack a human being because it's a divine entity.
They didn't see godliness, but they saw something that
I don't
scared
know.
them.
Maybe it's smell. Maybe it's something else.
Forget about Daniel. It says in the pasuk that a human being that animals won't attack you because they see the Tzelem Elokim. Yeah, what do you mean they see with their eyes? Listen, animals see things. I trust animals' sight far better than ours. They seem to have good instincts. They have good instincts.
Okay, but that's the difference between seeing.
The best proof is the question is whether you have to test it like this. If you, let's say, poke out the eyes of a lion and see if it would attack Daniel or not. I would say there's nothing wrong with seeing it physically. Why can't you say?
I don't say there is. I'm just
the physical entity. When God took Vayikach Man Adam and He put into a neshama, and not only the neshama is divine, that's a given. The neshama is divine. That's not the chiddush. Tzelem Elokim means Tzelem Admus, that even the physical body was shaped in the image of how God manifested. God is. Your question is not on human being. Your question is on Atzilus. God manifests in Atzilus. It says God manifests in B'tzura of Amara Adam. Yeah, we put the Paschalio.
Right, that's what it means.
So you want to say that this is just
What you asked me about?
that's a big chiddush.
Why is it a chiddush? I don't understand. The chiddush is what? That the physical, or the chiddush is that? What's that? But the chiddush is physical. The chiddush is that the Sefirah, that Eibishter has Sefirah, is made up of Sefirah. Forget about physical. You have a problem with Atzilus? Then Alakus. Why not? Why not? Why not? Yeah, exactly.
He's answering from the Shalom.
But the government, the physical, the level, the developing.
It's not correct.
No?
Of course, it's not physical.
Do you see the?
It's not physical.
But the most not physical, the shape. Okay, that's.
I think it's a far big. Frankly, I don't see an issue at all with it. The bigger issue is how Elokus gets into a tzir of Sefirah. That you don't have a problem. That is, a tzir of Ruchni Sefirah, you have no problem. You have a problem with Gashmis.
This we spoke about.
Elim and Iris and everything, and the whole structure. That's the Musagul. The whole structure.
Doesn't mean physical.
Das
You can't touch it.
Aber
You can't touch it. Of course not physical, you can't touch it.
Pain. Artist.
Anyway, as usual, we're not talking about what it's learning here. You're asking Aleph Beis, and I've often given you the offer to call me. You never call me, so
Because I mentioned it, saw Black Kiva, saw about the Yamsuf of Black Kiva. It's not been Ishmael Khalmas, yeah. It's in the book.
So what do you want to say?
No, what it means nothing. What it means, it's you, it's a list of the
The Chaim, by the way, also had the same story with the Neo. The lions didn't do anything to him. And that was
Okay, let's continue. I mean, I'll just say one thing, which is, to me, it would be more appropriate if you called me and asked me than doing it here. And you feel it's because you say I'm too busy. But Punfaket, to me, this distracts. If you call me, I would tell you. We could talk about this. There's Sfarim on this. There's old Bali Nigla that asked the question. There's the whole drasha there between the Shalshul Shuvas. Where he says, "How many mispal daza hatinik?" He's asking the Mukabalam, how could you be davening to Sefirah? The Eibush is made of Sefirah. The whole machlek is between Maral and the Rambam. The Rambam says, "Hu amadu hu yedeya," and the Maral says, "What do you mean? He's deya?" That's the chiddush, that the Eibush is the mile from every tziyur should have a tziyur. Once you could say that you can attribute tziyur to Lakus, so it comes to the Gashmis. What's the big thing? Gashmis is meaningless here. It's not the. Look, it says, "En le guf, en le musa guf." So not just guf.
Tzemach Tzedek tries to reconcile the machlek.
He does reconcile. Yeah, it's very clear. The difference is, it depends what level you talk. Obviously, Atzmus is lav inun kol inun midas klal. But he wanted to manifest. That's the whole point of what we're learning here in Ayin Beis, that God wants a world of structure. And he himself manifested in structure. Why do you say kosher? Because God is, what's the word? He chose to be bound by the laws of nature. Does he have to be? Doesn't have to be, but he chose to be. And once he chose to be, he's in there. That's why you say Shechinta Begalusa. How do you explain all these things? By me, that's what it comes down to. Obviously, Atzmus is beyond it all. But that Atzmus Nesavet Liris Leidid Betachtenim.
But it doesn't mean that he's having the physical shape.
Well, the physical is not the problem. Shape, yeah, and spiritual shape has no problem. Spiritual shape is fundamentally, philosophically, more bigger problem than physical.
I understand, but the bottom line,
does he have spiritual? Does he have spiritual shape? I want to know. That's not a problem.
Okay, I understand.
Spiritual shape is far bigger problem. Once it's spiritual shape, then it's already a matter of, okay, so now we put on a physical layer on it. So what?
I don't understand anything about spiritual, so it's easy.
No. The word shape is the problem, not the physical is the problem. That's what I'm trying to say. Huh? Once you apply shape, then what's the difference of spiritual shape and physical shape? Who cares? God is not bound by shape. He shows that the whole world of Atzilus is godly manifestation in Atziyut Adam. There's a thing called Adam Elyon. It's Atziyut Adam. Is God? It says V'lo Adamu, and he's beyond it. But this is the whole thing. I refer to you. Let me say, why don't you go back to chapter Hey and learn it? This is your homework. You give people homework, right? Here, Perek Hey. I'm giving you the Marmokim. You don't have to even look it up. Read Perek Hey, the beginning, page Ches. Imamish talks about this. He brings a posuk.
Thank you.
It says like this. The pasuk says, "Al dmus hakisei dmus kamar adam." Zay masber. This is Yecheskel. What did he see? Dmus kamar adam. So there's takakasha. I'm not saying it's not a question, but there's an explanation. This is not. No, you're saying it's a chiddush you heard it for the first time.
Yecheskel explained it. Dmus kamar adam, the structure, but not that.
But what's a why structure better solves? How does that solve the problem? The whole point of Chassidus is that the God is as distant from physical as he is from spiritual. Remember that. So spiritual shape and physical shape is the same thing, frankly. And I see no problem to say that when it says that God created things in this world, there are things that a table does not reflect the Tzelem Elokim, and a human being does. Why do we say we don't touch our beards? Tzelem Elokim, we say. Why don't you just say, I have a conceptual beard? There's something in the physical that even look. It says, I know you could say about a body. You don't say it's called nichsei shal kodesh baruch hu, human body. Yeah. Nichsei. Yeah, it's like okay. So it's not nichsei doesn't necessarily mean b'tzelem. I was looking for something that's itself, but definitely there's psukim, isn't it? Psukim by tattoos. Doesn't it say somewhere you're not supposed to make a tattoo because it's tzelem? Oh no, but tliyal eitz. Why do you take somebody off even when you hang him? Because it's Kim can't be hanging. Well, that's not beruchnis. Well, who cares? It's because beruchnis. There's definitely application to the physical. We're not saying God became physical. That's not what we're talking now. We're saying that this is a reflection of something divine. That's what it's saying. Who became a shalav? If you want to put it that way.
But the Goy doesn't have.
No, we are the image. Also, it's a chaviv adam shenivra b'tzelem. The Mishnah says. And everybody, every human being is a child of Adam and Chava by that virtue. They didn't say the same. There's different things, but it says in the Mishnah Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem.
Doesn't say the Kim.
And then it says Shenamar.
Right. I know.
And then it says Chvivin Yisrael.
Yeah.
That's no. That's clear. It's not even a Shiloh question about that. Perik Yavis in the beginning of Perik Perik Dalet.
Exactly the same to our eyes.
Okay, let's go on to the parts of.
Somebody told me that some Sefirah said that really Jewish people need different medication because even their body is different. Only Mitzad Mechira Hashem made it should look the same.
Yeah.
Who said that? Who said this?
Some Sefirah.
Okay, it says in Zohar. I mean, he's a little, but I'm sure he took it from there. This is common. Zohar says why kashrus? Why if kashrus is so important? Why shouldn't everybody have kashrus? She says that the id is like lev shebeguf, and a lev is more sensitive. Therefore, the foods that go in there have to be more sensitive. Yeah. Look, there's ganze pieces on this. If you look in Chelik Tezvav L'Kutei Sichos Noach, he brings there a whole section how Shabbos it says that the pulse changes, the face of a person changes. He brings the whole thing Nahar Sambiat and Yechiach, that there's physical changes in the world even on Shabbos and also in a Jew, Begashmis. The fact that you don't see it is that's already due to our own
dullness.
Right, callousness. Okay, so here we go.
Saying about the religion when he was 5 years old, and he learned with his teacher the Gemara, what happened to somebody that is in the desert? He doesn't know when Shabbos is. So the religion said, what do you mean he doesn't know? Look at the sky, you see it Shabbos.
Yeah.
He was 5 years old.
So he says, that's why Atzilus is compared to fire. So Eish Mayim Ruach Ofar will be the four worlds. So Atzilus is compared to fire. That God is a fire that consumes. The Kamoisha Eish moved a little Mikol, how you say this, just like fire is separate from all the elements, which means Mayim Ruach Ofar, it's a completely different element. You can't compare earth, wind, and water to fire.
You can't feel anything, that's it.
Kamay Ken Atzilus moved a little Biyah. Same thing, Atzilus is completely separate from Biyah. And we're going to learn here that in every Sefirah you have every one of these levels. He's now explaining the distinction, how separate the worlds are. Okay. V'chein Bria moved l'Yitzira. And the same thing, Bria and Yitzira are also separate, distinct. We learned this a little earlier. Remember which chapter? Because Bria is not yet a real Metzias. It's only the possibility for Metzias. Where did we just learn it?
He just mentioned it.
Right, left side, correct. I know, because I remember from there.
I think we looked at
by Alma Discussia, yeah?
I think it's the Shain Gimel.
Yeah. By Alma Discussia, Alma Discussia.
Shain Gimel.
Choshat.
Yeah, that's why there could be the air there, right here. Okay.
I don't see those words here.
Yeah, the bottom, close to the bottom.
Yeah.
Knoided the bria b'chinas of shoyes hametzias levad. Chapter Kuf Mem Aleph. Okay, we have to say it. Fine. So Yitziru is Galus HaMetzias, and Yitziru is Galus HaMetzias. I explained then, there's different ways to explain of Shoyes HaMetzias. I just said, Yitzilus is Elikus, it's like a Merkava, completely aligned. It's a structure, but it's completely aligned. If you wanted to see how the world was in its perfect state, before Chet Eitzadas, that would be Yitzilus. Not completely, but Al Derech Zeh. Fine. Bria,
Not completely. Higher than Atzilus?
not higher, lower probably, but the idea aligned. It's exactly aligned.
Indeterminacy.
The only distinction is that Atzilus doesn't have any form of any. There's no sense of self at all. Bria, on the other hand, is already beginning, as I said, to be an entity, but this entity is still aligned. But it's the beginning of an entity. What does that mean? So we discussed. I gave one example was.
It's not beginning, the possibility.
We said about
Okay.
Al-Mukhava that they weren't conscious. They didn't know.
No, but the example I gave was like when you make an outline, like a skeleton, of a structure. So you don't yet have. I'm just using a physical example. You don't have it's not fleshed out yet. It's an outline, but the outline is there. That's called bria without tzura. So it's like chemer without tzura. So the word of shoyes hametzias can be interpreted several ways. It doesn't necessarily mean possibility of metzias. It could be. It's not yet a full entity of metzias, so it's called. Like it could remain a skeleton and never take on shape. Yeah, it's the beginning of a process for sure. The question is, what exact state is it in? Now remember, Yitzir is also ruchnius, so it's not like Bria is ruchnius and Yitzir is gashmius. Even Asiyah is ruchnius. So it's all. That's why conceptual. So it's conceptual.
You see 15 years in 1 second. Yitzir.
Yeah. So you have to say. That's why I'm using the example. I often use the example of the four worlds to make it a little palatable. Is that we all go through 4 states in anything we create, any project, any business plan, anything, architecture. Atzilus would be the vision of the whole project. Bria is the outline, and you literally make an outline, or a skeleton. So you look at a building, you see the skeleton. Yitzir is when you start you flesh it out and you break it down, and Asiyah is the full-blown final entity. Everything needs to go through these 4 steps.
Atzilus is the vision.
In this case, you could say the vision is like the vision, the unity. It's a unified vision of the whole thing. It's the one who has the whole. It's exactly aligned. Yeah, you could say vision. Formation, but the vision. So,
Bria would be the outline or the blueprint because and how that jives with Eshar's Metzias. It seems to be much more. That new terminology seems to be much more refined than before.
But before we get to Avshayis and Metzias, tell me how you translate Metzias. Yitzira would be Metzias, right? He says it's Galus and Metzias. So how would you translate Metzias? Give me an English translation.
Well,
remember, you can't use physical. It's not physical. It's spiritual.
Existence would generally be.
So define. It means a spiritual existence, and Yitzira is not a spiritual existence, and Atzilus is not a spiritual existence.
Something you can clearly identify. Something separate and identifiable.
Hold on a second. But Atzilus is also an existence. So the word existence is not a good word. Existence means something exists.
It's not separate and identifiable. It's unified.
But he's not using. If he would say that, he would say Achdus, Nivdal, Pirud.
Which
is always something for itself.
How would it doesn't? It seems how this terminology even applies to Bria, because we always say Bria is the beginning of Yesh Mi'ayin, right? Bria is already in existence.
I told you, Avshayis Metzias, my definition of it is when something is an outline, it's still not the Metzias, the final thing. It could just, there are a lot of, of course it's a mashal, because it's a ruchni, we're doing ruchnius here. So you have to have examples to explain it. So I would say that Avshayis Metzias, you're trying to define if Avshayis Metzias means it's not Metzias, it's not a Metzias, it's not a not Metzias.
Before an outline. To me, that would seem to be that's the possibility of an outline.
But I look, even Ak is an outline. So I don't know what I mean. To me, the example works in the structure I just defined. Compared to a fleshed out thing, it's not a Metzias yet. It's all relative in that sense. Look, I would love to hear a different example. But remember, it has to be an example that's consistent through all the 4 worlds. So that's why I gave an example. Atzilus being the vision, Bria the outline, compared to for example, let's say, they say a child, the first few weeks, it can easily become a nafel, right? It could become a nafel. It could, God forbid, what's the word? Miscarry. Because it's still at a stage where it's not yet necessarily fully, the seed has not fully held on to the energy yet. It's going to be a growing entity. So that's, in a way, is called Avsharas HaMetzias in that sense. In the form, in generally speaking, Bria is the chaymer. Bria is like a raw piece of material. Let's say a raw piece of clay. It's not yet been shaped into a vessel. That's called Avsharas HaMetzias. Not Avsharas that's clay. The clay is there, but it's still only in its raw state where you don't yet see a beautiful ornament, or a plain piece of gold.
That's the opposite of an outline almost. That's very hard to put the two together.
It's two different examples.
Yeah.
My point is that it's anyway.
I think it's a little.
If you have, as I said, I'm open to if someone has a. It's one thing to ask questions on what I'm saying. Another thing is to provide an alternative.
The Ramban is calling it hiyuli.
Okay, define hiyuli.
Potential.
You said that too.
Okay, that's fine. If you want to work with that word, I'm fine with that.
That's a tziyur also. Potential is also a tziyur.
Remember, but you have to understand. So how is it? Atzilus is what? What would you call Atzilus? If Bria is potential, what's Atzilus? Not even potential.
That's why
you can't say that. That's the problem.
Vision. You said Atzilus is vision. Vision means that it has already a connection to it.
No, but vision has a connection. No one said Atzilus has no connection to Bria. It's just it's a separate world.
That's already an entity.
If you call it Bria a potential, I ask you what you call Atzilus.
Potential for potential.
I think that maybe the better analogy would be the thoughts, where the Alter already talks about the osios in your mind, and the ability to think that.
In chapter, what do we say? Chapter 141, he uses Bria as being machshava, and Yitzira as being dibur. But machshava, tell me, machshava is Avsharas HaMetzias. Compared to the words, the letters in Bria, dibur, it's also like outline. Either way you're going to go, you're going to have to deal with an entity here. You just have to find an example that compared to the next levels is Avsharas HaMetzias. I have no problem. Thought is a perfect example, by the way. So. But thought by you is Avsharas, it fits with the words Avsharas HaMetzias.
Once he has a thought, it's already Yitzira to me.
Thought is a Metzias.
So what is it? So no. But Bria is machshava and Yitzira is dibur. That's what it says. So what you're talking about the potential for thought, and what's Atzilus? If that's the case.
Like koach haseichel, just the ability to be.
Okay, you're creating right now. Okay, the problem with no.
Creating my own.
Exactly, what you're doing is you're creating your own chassidus. But you're saying what you just said, by the way, I've never seen anywhere. It says what it does say is what I said does say. It says that Bria is a chaymer, and Yitzir is a tzura, and Asiyah is a full-blown thing, which is what I said basically, outline, details, and then the full-blown. Atzilus is vision, that for sure says. I'm not making it up. It's not I'm just giving an example in our world.
And thought and speech.
Thought, speech, and action, that's befeir. That we learned inside. That Bria is thought. But what's wrong with saying that the letters in thought, the letters,
right,
are far more amorphous than they are in dibur, which are tangible? Why can't you say because that's Avsharas HaMetzias and that's Metzias? I don't say it's galus. That's fine. You're focusing on the word of Avsharas HaMetzias like as if there's nothing else. You have to remember, if Bria is Avsharas HaMetzias, what's Atzilus? So you have to understand there's a process going on here. So we're talking about really understanding Edelkeit, type of a refined state in an earlier state before it gets into a little more defined, more tangible state. I would find, and Avsharas HaMetzias, if I really had to define it, I would say it's more the ethereal.
So which one is
the ethereal dimension before it gets to the next layer that becomes much more tangible. That's how I would define it. But here we're not talking about tangible physically, we're talking, let's say, Aishis. That's a good example. The Aishis in your thought are, compared to the Aishis in Dibur. Dibur, you see me, I say Aleph. Tell me, think of the word Aleph now. Think the word Aleph in your mind. You can think it. Compare now the Aleph in your mind and the Aleph that I just said, and then an Aleph on paper. Same Aleph. And one led to the next, because I had to say it first in my mind before I spoke it in Dibur. The answer would be, there you have a Bria, Yitzir, and Asiyah in a certain way. What you see from this is how far we are from this, because we're such Magushim Dika people. By us to think like that is already 1 second. Okay, what's that?
Never leaves the neutral in this case. That's the problem.
No, but that's why. But Bria is a state where everything is in that, relatively speaking, is like Oishis HaMachshava. If that works, that's a perfect example, because he used this example. I'm fine with that. That's what he called it, the hidden worlds compared to the next. That's what actually it fits, because he says, what is Yitzirah? It's Galus HaMetzias. He doesn't say Bria HaMetzias, he says his Galus HaMetzias, when that's of Sharias HaMetzias. Okay. I understand it quite abstractly as well. Like, for example, they say about a cholam, that Hakel Helach Achar HaPisun. When someone tells a dream, it will follow the interpretation of the dream. The question is, what does that mean? You dreamt or you didn't dream it? Because a dream is a type of Bria state. It's of Sharias HaMetzias, can go like this, can go like that. And when you spell it out and say, this is the interpretation, you've given it reality. You've given it...
You saw the photon.
Yeah.
I think it's more like...
The way it became a photon. Boom.
I never thought about it that way. With a dream.
That's an excellent example here. In other words, there are states that can go... You have to learn with empirical fundamentals.
Bria is like a quantum.
I was thinking that Bria, how would you relate this to stem cells? Stem cells are a cell that can turn into any kind of specific kind of tissue. So
possible.
Meaning it's a potential for any kind.
Also the uncertainty of quantum mechanics is that way. Quantum, the state of probability, where it's a state of indeterminism.
Before it is determined.
So if quantum is Bria, what's Atzilus? Pre-quantum.
Yeah. You should have heard the John Batchelor slogan.
Oh,
the new physicist on. You can probably get it. I can see if I can find it for you from last night.
Okay, let's continue here. So Bria.
I want to ask you about his dream because I was thinking about my stuff.
And that's why they're distant from one another. So now we got here, Atzilus is like Eish, fire, that's completely different. Now Bria and Yitzirah is Avsharis HaMetzias and is Galus HaMetzias. Back in chapter Kuf Mem, Kuf Mem Aleph, he explained it's Machshava and Dibur. Fine. That's why they're distant from one another. So now he's adding a new thing. In every Sefirah, you have all 4 dimensions. That means separate levels. Now he's going to explain what they are. Now what is the Abiyah now? We learned what the Sefirahs are in Chochmah. Because Chochmah has in it midas of Chochmah, the inclinations, the different things we discussed.
So this is parts of.
This is going to explain parts of. So he's saying, B'Chochmah yesh leimer, what's Abiyah in Chochmah? That's what he's going to explain now. Shazel al derech moshel, that this is like an example, K'mein yonim hamistaifim in hasechel. That the Abiyah, the worlds, or these dimensions in Chochmah, is like example is like things that are derivatives. Derivatives from an intelligent idea, from intelligence. So in other words, you have a concept, a theory has been developed. Okay? But now there's derivatives that has implications. They are their implications, they're not part of the original idea. The original idea has what they call in mathematics. You have the theorems and you have the corollaries. Corollaries, Klal and Prat. Like Ovison told us, right? Yeah. Well, let's say, I think here it's even further down, because it's in Yonim Nivdalim and Gufa Seichel. So they're separate from the Gufa Seichel. The word Nivdalim is the key operative word, you see? Like the worlds are separate from each other, these are separate from the Gufa Seichel. So in other words, you could have the same idea, this one have implication in the world of psychology, this could have implication in the world of commerce. Same theory, has 2 different worlds. So this is a Yashleimer, by the way. It's a Chiddush.
Like Chesed, which has Abiyah in it.
Yeah.
Well,
he's using Chachma. Yeah. 1 second. Tehine proti ha'inyanim shebaseichel hariz gufa shel ha'askala. He's explaining what means nivdalim. What means outside of the realm. They're derivatives that are outgrowths. They're like foreign applications to an original idea. Basically, I don't mean foreign. I mean to say that they're outside of the original idea. So he says like this. Because the details of the concept, the details of the intellectual idea, has a guf shel haskala. That's part of this, that's the guf. That's part of the body of the seichel. That's the sefirah. Shemischalekes leprate inyanim sheba. So the Haskalah divides and breaks down to all kinds of details. The chesed shebezeh, the gvura shebezeh, the inclinations we discussed. Okay. Avol inyanim ha-mistayfim, but things that are derivatives. Mistayif means literally like a sofa. Mistayif that grows out of it.
Branches out.
Branches out. Okay. Branches is a good word. Yes. Yeah. They could be, doesn't mean they have to be, but they could be in Yonim Nidal Nagar Haskalazu. Things that are completely separate from the original Haskalah. That's that's clear. There's clearly, we have many examples for that. An idea can be stated by somebody, and he wouldn't even have imagined how it was applied to a situation that was completely different, different idiom or different paradigm. That's the word, paradigm, different paradigm.
He's been doing the whole time. He's been doing something like this the whole time.
Who's he?
The Rebbe. I mean.
Fine, yeah. Okay, so this is the Yeshlemer that of Abiyah. So basically, an idea like Chochmah can actually bring something into Atzillah, something into Bria, something in Tzira, something in Asiyah. I know, I'm just spelling it out. 4 different worlds, 4 different entities have been informed by this idea, and they don't necessarily even have any connection to one another. That's fine. That's good. Why not? It says the 4 worlds within each. I mean, the first one may be connected. I mean, he's not breaking it out, but that's basically saying there's 4 different
worlds within the Sefirah.
In other words, let's say a shayfa. Here we have a good example of many examples. You have a court of law, Supreme Court. A ruling is based, and the ruling has all kinds of logic in it, and it'll be used 100 years later to be cited for a completely different case, citing this, where the original judge didn't even have it in mind. It's completely being applied in a different situation based on the logic of a precedent in a
legal.
Yeah, and I mean the Gemara we have hundreds of cases like this where a theory is brought. You see, the whole Gemara is based on this. Someone says this, and they'll suddenly bring a theory from there, and you wouldn't even have thought that it had connection. And you realize, yeah, that's an interesting conclusion.
The whole matter on halacha is based on that.
Right, of course, yeah.
You have today situations you didn't have.
So this is already Parzuf. So this is already not Sefirah. Sefirah is the idea. Parzuf is now, it's already like broadening out into a whole, like he said, branching out. That's good, branching out. It's a tree now. It's no longer just a small whatever you call it, a small shrub. It's a tree. It's now very good.
3D.
So the spheres have now assumed, yeah. So we have black and white, color, and 3D. We've gone from
3D printing.
and we've gone.
That's Mashiach.
That's unbelievable.
But 1 second. So we have 1 second. What is it called? We went from. What's the opposite of digital? Digital and analog to digital. Okay, good.
1 second. All these things are still within the sphere. These 4 worlds
are in each sphere. In each sphere.
So how could you say that's the part? We said the part.
That's it. That's what he's calling. He didn't finish. Let's see. I don't know. Now it says in Eitz Chaim that the 4 worlds are the 4 levels of Deimim Tzemeya Chaim Medaber. It's relentless. I told you. This doesn't stop.
I mean, you said Atzilus was fire, and you didn't even give the other ones.
I know, but right. It's also Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drusad are also the 4. So this is now branching out.
Wow, this is real. This is branches out. This is derivatives of.
Yeah. Deimim hu Asiyah. The mineral world is Asiyah. Lowest world. Semeach is Yitzira. So vegetation, flora, right? Is Yitzira. The Mashakosov, Oz Yiranu, Kol Atzeyar. That then they will sing. They will all the trees of the forest. Koyal Malachim di Yitzira. He's proving it. It goes on the angels of Yitzira. Atzeyar, trees of the forest. Yeah. V'chai Bria. It's interesting. Only by Yitzira it brings a raya. What about the others? Okay, Chai is Bria. Umedaber is Atzilus. The Dal Madreg is Atzcham, Em Gamkim Uvdalim Zebezeh. He's proving what he said till now. The 4 levels of Dem Semechem are also separate from one another, just like we just discussed in the earlier. The Medaber moved to Mekulam. The Medaber, the speaker, meaning the human being, is completely separate from all of them. B'yisun ma'alos ha'seichel shabai, with the virtue, the advantage of the superiority of his intelligence within him. Shebezeu l'mayla mekulam. With this, he's above them all. She'einu nimtza b'shum echad mehem. None of them have the level of intelligence of a human being. V'agam de behema yesh l'k'tzaz das. I guess he means a behema within the Adam too, I assume, right? That even though a behema has a little das, has a little seichel, a little...
No, we just said
Talking about a behema here.
I know, I understand. I just added a little joke. I meant the behema sheba Adam. Yeah. Says even though a behema also, he just said he doesn't have. Say that. Well, k'mashikos yada sherkeinu u'berechus mina esher kai gavna. We say yada sherkeinu, the sher, an ox knows its owner, its purchaser, its acquirer, its owner. And we see it runs away from fire, similar, so that means you can't say it's just deaf, dumb, and mute. This is called, sometimes it's called seichel hanikne, by the way. It's you just say? This is a natural thing. This is not intelligence called the ability to transcend one's nature and to abstract and theorize. This is natural, the natural thing to escape from something that's dangerous, from destructive force. When it says Yad Hasher, that the Sher knows its owner, that it is some knowledge. Okay, fire, fine, I understand. I could say an animal has an impulse, an instinct. It sees fire, it runs away. Just like, for example, a magnet drawn to each other. You're not going to say a magnet has seichel. The properties of a magnet, that it has a certain natural repelling or natural attraction. But Yada Sherkeinu, what's that? Zeo das hanikna. Lavad. Lo das seichli mamish. Nikna means acquired, not inherent. So nikna, like the word from kinyan, it's like it purchased it, or, So das hanikna. Das hanikna also means that it's sometimes used as an expression, das hanikna, acquired. It doesn't mean it acquires it later in life. It means it's not that the behemoth is a bar seichel. It has an acquired element. It has. Trained. Oh, it's not trained either. That's what he means. Das hanikna is trained. Maybe das hanikna. I always understood das hanikna is like when an animal has the wisdom to hunt. That's not trained.
That's also acquired. Why? Trained is the same. It's a derivative. It's a mistake.
No, because yadid sher keno.
He's a geboren azach.
No, but when a lion hunts, it's a geborene zach. So, but there's seichel in how it hunts. If there's a wisdom, it has. That's not das hanikna. You think das hanikna is like you train a dog, or you train an animal to listen to its owner.
It's like a domestically raised cat.
That's das hanikna. I always understood das hanikna as being the das that they're born with. But it's not pure das.
I think that you're right.
I'm almost sure I'm right, because I know that in other contexts. I know, but the word nikne seems acquired like trained, and here yada sherkeinu seems like it's trained.
It's not the real das. That's what it means.
That's for sure. That's not the real das for sure. But which one? It's right. It's like a. Why is it called nikne? Because it means it's like not. It's not.
It's not trained by it. It's
not defined by it. That's what I mean. It's not.
If any,
it means it's not defined by it.
Yeah, I understand. It's like a Shem HaMushal.
Was er ook befehlen? Behema yesh lo ktsas das. Mo lomosel Yod Sher Konehu. Was mit Yod Sher Konehu? Das nicht kein tiefes dicke Sach, was geboren, as weiß, sich bin.
But we're saying the opposite. We're saying the opposite. Yeah, but then he adds the second thing. Umashi Yod Sher Zeo das hanikla. Lo das sichli mamish. Okay, it's clearly not das sichli. That's what it means. It's not a das. It's not a natural process. Not the animal has to think and be taught and learn. This is the owner. It's a certain. It does feed into. No. I have to say something. A human being will not be taught to listen to its master. An animal you can easily train. Why? Because it has that. It's not a bar seichel. It doesn't have independent intelligence. So you're really training something that it has already naturally. So I think it's not. In other words, it's not acquired. By humans, you could say far more acquired. A person has an acquired skill; he learns how to do something.
About it, that atam, you're only chayav chatzin nezek. But if you change ownership, it becomes if it's a shemur, then you change ownership, it becomes a tam. How's that possible?
Because the new owner. Okay.
Yeah, because the new owner. So in other words, it senses that it has a new owner.
So it's like a new beginning. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. It's basically instinctive knowledge. That's what it really is. Instinctive intelligence, not.
So instinctive would be the opposite of acquired.
Correct. That's why I wonder why the word nikna.
Instinctively acquire knowledge.
Das
Nikna means it's not the real das. It's an additional.
Like Shema Mushal. Yeah. I think nikna doesn't mean acquired as in a trained.
Right.
I think it means acquired that it's superimposed.
When it's born,
it's not, as you said, it's not
personality. It's some type of separate seichel. It's not his seichel.
Shema
It's
Mushal.
acquired something that is outside his own seichel.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's natural to it.
Right, because when he's born with it, but it's not the animal itself. It's some additional kind of senses or something.
And I think we all got the Havana of it. We're just trying to fit into the right words.
If he didn't have an owner, he wouldn't recognize the owner.
Yeah. Today, some people, it seems the other way around. Their dogs own them.
I mean, they have these chimpanzees and things like that. They can train now. They can.
Also, look at the seeing eye dogs. Unbelievable how they train animals. No, but that shows that only certain animals are trainable because that animal has in it the ability to do that. The training is not the key chiddush here. It's not that it's trained.
Rambam says the story with the cat.
It goes both ways. A human you could never train that way. On the other hand, a human has real das, not das anikna. It's a double thing here. Ki das v'seichel le'nimtze rak ba'adam. Das and seichel, like he says, le das sichli mamish. Interesting. Das hanikna is not das sichli. That's the bottom line. It's not. You know what it is? It's instinctive for sure. Das sichli means deliberate intelligence, where you're applying yourself to sit down and think.
Learn it.
Or you're doing something for a reason.
Das v'seichel le'nimtze rak ba'adam only exists by Adam. Das and seichel. The difference between das seichel is intelligence in general. Das is more of to know, not knowledge. To know. That's why he's separate from all other creatures outside of him, separate from him, different from him. And Chai is also separate from the vegetation. Because in Eitz Chaim he says that each one of them has a different nefesh. Okay? So nefesh HaChiyunis, the fact that he's alive, it's a different type of nefesh than from Tzemech. Now, these two are closer, basically. They're the mineral and the vegetable are closer, or close. Because daimim also has chayis. The Rizal says. This is brought in Shayach Ramon in the first Perek. The daimim also has a life. It's called the life of a daimim. It doesn't mean life, movement, or feeling. It means the fact that it exists. There's a nefesh that keeps mineral existent. He's saying now that they're closer. Fundamentally, a flower or vegetation is also mineral.
Daimim is mineral. That's how you interpret it.
The mineral world. I don't mean mineral. I mean that's stone. Anything that's inanimate, basically, doesn't grow. He says in Eitz Chaim, by the way, coral is a mamutza between Tzemech and Medabel. Coral, because it grows. But the general, we talk about stones. We're talking about dirt, earth.
Yeah.
Earth is in the world of daimim.
Rabbi Miguel says when he translated for the Siddur, I think the domim.
What did he do?
He passed it into the Rabbi, and the Rabbi came back. He didn't know whether to do domim literally means silent or inanimate.
Inanimate.
So he wrote inanimate, and then he put in parentheses the Rabbi Miguel inanimate, and then wrote in parentheses silent. The Rabbi changed it. He said the first parish is silent, and then put inanimate.
That's interesting. Where is it in Siddur Daimim? Daimamti. Daimamti is silent for sure, huh? Yeah. No, not the Siddur. Maybe in Siddur, he translates to the Parshas, maybe the beginning and end of Kriyas HaTorah, Monday, Thursday. No, I'm sure there's a Daim somewhere. One of the Slichas, there must be somewhere that we do. Every word. Called the Mesihila.
So the dog is
that's clearly silent.
Nicht kein lebendige Sache.
Ich weiß, dass wir kein Medaik sein, weil das lauf darf gedämen mit Chassidus, der Dämen in jedem Posse kann sein.
Okay.
It was in the Siddur, he said, for sure Siddur? Not like Tanya, maybe?
Maybe.
Oh, you also translate.
Hey, right here.
Because lo yidim is for sure quiet. Yeah, but that's pashut. Inanimate. He doesn't mean animate. No. He probably Tanya. He translated Tanya. He translated Shaykh Ramuna. What? Which one did he translate?
Actually,
lo yidim is silence.
Right.
Yeah, but there's no havamina. It's inanimate. You wouldn't say lo yidim is inanimate. Okay, fine. Interesting. It's interesting. I translate mineral simply because mineral, vegetable, animal, human. That doesn't mean mineral. Daimim does mean technically, but I wouldn't. If I would translate in an essay, I wouldn't translate silent because it doesn't. When silent, vegetable.
Well, if
you have to explain what you mean.
But if you're speaking, if you're saying the highest level is medaber, speaking.
Okay, that's nice.
The lowest level
is silence. Okay, interesting. That's a good way to put it. Fine. Look, there's also explaining it to people to know what you're talking about. Besides,
medaber means seichel. It doesn't mean medaber.
In Chelik Vav, in the Kutei Sichos, Chelik Vav, Yisrei, the Rebbe asked this question: why do you say medaber? Why don't you say seichel? Maskil. Because Medaber, he says, is able to go out of himself to communicate to another. Is ultimate seichel.
Seichel is for yourself.
Yeah. It's basically Hafshata. There he speaks in Yisrei, he speaks that there's the most ruchnisdike thing, it's ruchnis. Medaber captures the ruchnis, because ruchnis means you can go out of yourself and not just be in yourself. The lower the levels, the more mugushim they become, the more self. Like two flowers can communicate to each other. Minerals don't, and animals for sure do. Flowers, for example, you have the pollination from one to another. So there's one stone doesn't help another stone grow. Maybe they can talk to each other, but it's a different language.
They can connect. If you put a stone by a stone with years, they will. Also, there's some kind.
But let's put it this way: they definitely don't fight with each other.
They do. Water can erode stones.
Yeah, no, but you have this. By the way, water. There's three opinions whether water. Some say chai, tzemeach, or daimim.
Even
high.
Because it has an element of life. Ma'am chaim. Then you have salt. There's also three opinions, and Arizal brings salt. Then it says there's three types of salt. Salt from water is maybe in the world of tzemeach. Salt from what you mine salt, from quarries. That's for sure daimim. And then there's a third salt he brings. Forgot where. There's the water salt. There's three types of salt. From daimim that you dig out from water. The third type, I forgot which one. Yeah, I have to look it up.
Who is this? Arizal?
Yeah. Arizal is very much into this whole daimim.
Does he parallel it with ABS?
Yeah, that's what you just said. Eitz Chaim. This Eitz Chaim. It's Sharabiyah Perek Aleph.
It's a Eitz Chaim.
Yeah. So let's continue here. So now he's saying daimim and tzemeach are closer to each other because they're both really daimim, except in the tzemeach adds. No, the tzemeach is really like inanimate, but it has a nefesh at tzemechas. Why can't you say an animal? On the other hand, is a completely different entity. He's making daimim and tzemeach closer to each other. And the only thing is tzemeach is a 1 second.
He's having chayus. Nefesh aduimamis.
That means the life within a flower, within a vegetation, is not as mitzumtzum, not as concealed as it is in an inanimate element, a mineral. It's more revealed. That's why it has some expansion. It grows from small to big. But fundamentally it's daimim. It's interesting. In other words, by a chai, you don't say a chai is a daimim that has a nefesh achayunis that makes it an animal. It's fundamentally a different entity.
See that in the sea, you want to say it's closer.
Yeah, exactly. But an animal is not at all inanimate. Its body is not daimim. Its body is not an inanimate thing. In other words, a flower, if you didn't know that a flower grows, and you just saw it there cut off, let's say, it would look like a daimim. Actually, when you cut it, it is a daimim. It doesn't stop growing. So it's no more tzemeach. An animal,
not everything.
But an animal when he dies, and also a human being, also becomes a daimim. I don't know, I'm not sure. But clearly, you don't
have to cut it off to see that it's a daimim. I mean, look at a flower, you don't see that it grows or anything, you just see it. An animal, if it's alive, even if it's sleeping.
Yeah, because the ikar is the chayis, not the guf.
If the thing is alive.
He says, "Ayin mashakos b'teireh dal lahovin atam shenishtana." The interesting thing is that shenishtana gufa adam. So he says only shenishtana pasha bereishis. You know why? Because he's also saying a chay. That's what he says there. That once a nefesh goes inside a human being, the whole human being becomes elevated. It's not like your body is just a stone that became, like for example, when I throw a stone, the stone doesn't come alive. Doesn't come a flying stone. It's a stone that I superimpose my power. When your body comes alive, the body is not like a stone that's flying. The body itself is now elevated to the neshama is in control of your body. So every inch of your body, even the outer layers of your skin are alive. Nothing is not alive. She says the same thing as with an animal. So fundamentally, that's the point. Then the soul inside of a plant, it makes it grow, but it didn't make the plant suddenly become a alive like, let's say, an animal. Even though you touch even the petal, it is moist and so on. When you cut it off, it's okay, but it's closer to a daemon. That's for sure.
The nefesh.
Yeah. Right. The nefesh is tzemech. But in an animal, and for sure in a human being, the life, basically chayis, is much more powerful force than the daemon part. Here, the daemon is dominant, and just in tzemech, it's also growing. That's the key. So Atzilus and Bria are closer than Yitzira and Asir are like closer to, but they're still movdal. Vatzameach einam erke klal. But a tzameach, a plant, is completely not close in proportion to an animal. The nefesh achai hu nefesh mamish k'mesha kosem makmacher. The nefesh achai is not just giving life to a day, making it grow. It's mamish a nefesh. It's a life force.
It is what it is. That's what a person is. It's his nefesh.
He's talking about an animal here.
What?
We're talking about an animal.
Leikein hatzemeh. Leikein hatzemeh v'ademim but and it's not that way in a plant and in a daemon, in an animate mineral. Shanefesh behem b'chinas chayis levad lo nefesh mamish. Because the nefesh in them is not a nefesh, a soul. It's a chayis. It's like electricity. It's like an electric force that's giving them some substance and giving some life. But you can't call it a nefesh. Interesting. And a madaber is separate from chay, as we said, canal. Interesting, there's a mimer from the Rebbe Marash. He's asked, what happens to nefesh of an animal after it dies? Being that it's a nefesh, in Migdalays, he brings it to Mushain. It's a whole mimer, very interesting mimer. Is it similar to a nefesh of a human being? Does it go somewhere, in other words? Because a nefesh of a chai is not like a tzemeach. Tzemeach, as here you could say, tzemeach withers, and that's it. The chai leaves, and that's that. It doesn't have a nefesh. There's no entity called a soul entered into it. So his conclusion is that it's not like a human for sure. I think his conclusion is that its nefesh goes also, doesn't go anywhere.
Because there's an animal gone in?
There's animal doctors. There's animal therapists. I know a wealthy couple in Manhattan. They have a few dogs, and they take their dogs to a therapist because the dogs have been showing lately the neurosis. You know what the therapist said to them? The dog doesn't have neurosis. It's picking it up from you guys are fighting all the time, and I can tell the dog is really. And because of their dog, they're going down to therapy to make shalom bayis. That's what I said to you. Some people the share knows its owner, and some people the owner the dog owners them.
People are doing that with horses. It's a major thing. They use horses to as a therapy because they're reflective of the person.
My sister lives in the Upper East Side. My sister lives in the Upper East Side, but she had I think her 7th child. So someone on the neighbor said, now you've passed everybody in this block because the only one that had 7 was down the block. They had 7 dogs. And now you have children. Nobody had 7, but dogs. One person had 7 dogs.
But a dog. But the dog therapist was a person.
That's a good question. Good question.
In the dog world.
So when I told the story, I said, this is a befedish medrash. In a mabul, every animal was killed, except those that he saved, except fish. Because the animals got corrupted because of the human beings. It's befedish. Even animals that don't have bchira and so on, you hang around human beings long enough, they can screw you up too.
This is very hard to understand.
I see it all the time. What are you talking about? Look at a dog living in an erotic home. It's a rachmanis. Yeah. Like what's he said? You know the joke that when the camel. So the baby camel asks his mother camel, "Why do we look so weird? Other animals are so beautiful. There, this one has wings. This one has blue eyes. This. We look like these ugly with humps and long feet and long eyelash. Everything sounds out of order." So the mother says, "Everything is in order." She says, "Why the humps?" She says, "Because when we walk through the long deserts, the humps carry a lot of water. What about the long eyelashes? because of the sandstorms, so it protects us. What about these big, ugly feet? He says, so in the sand, we're far easier to walk. So the baby camel says to the mother, so what are we doing in the zoo? You know? One little problem. They become the...
The evolution.
They should change.
After a while, these zoo camels will change. They won't need any of those things.
I have a lot of these animal jokes.
That's what it said.
Okay. So anyway, so I have to look up the Reb Marash's Vort and see how it's connected here. But it's interesting, Maimer, very interesting Maimer. Yeah. Dog owners. Today it's a big thing. It's a very good question. There'll soon be dog therapists, I'm sure. They'll train them.
But soon, there are today.
Dog veterinarians. Listen, remember a few years ago there was a big lawsuit?
Therapist, that's a door.
Remember the lawsuit?
Yes.
A few years ago there was a lawsuit where there was this place that was burying dogs, a dog cemetery. Instead they found out they're throwing them out the window. And they're not burying them, nothing. And they're coming to watch their dog. They come, their dog is not there. Though there's a tombstone. And they had their major emotional trauma. They sued for millions of dollars because they found out they were dumping out the dogs and putting other dogs in there. So it's not my dog there; it's someone else's dog.
My students are showing me the pictures from their dogs.
It's emotional.
An important.
So they told me. I said, let them have a few children.
On a much more serious note, in Tucson, Arizona, like almost 9 years ago, there was this woman who had a fire in her house, and she sent the fire department to save her babies, and they came out with cats. And so they put the fire department, the life on the line in a fire to save cats. There's a big...
She didn't say cats, she said babies.
She said babies.
Understand. Kitzer. Ubir Ayin. Interesting. Okay. Ubir Ayin yesh lahagdim. To explain this, we have to preface. I have it ben Amshach b'as Sefirah l'tzedek Atzilus l'tzedek Biyah. The difference between the Amshach, the transmission of that Sefirah, for Atzilus and for Biyah. That's where he's going. So Atzilus is completely different than Biyah. He made the parts of verstehen. The Lapamim nikra Hamshach b'shem Esis, Lapamim b'shem Cyrus. Sometimes transmission is called the name of letters, and sometimes it's hairs, like hair strands, very narrow channels. Now, Tihine Yesh Nekuda Sefirah Patzer. Now there is Nekuda Sefirah Patzer. Nekuda b'chinas Keser sheb'Sefirah. Nekuda, the point is the Keser in each Sefirah. She called Haklolis is a general. Oya Atzmis, or the core shel Sefirah. Ukuma Yedias Atzmis shebechachma shebekeach chachmasei leda. You see here, that's why it seems like Keser is that, because he says Ukumay. Like when you know in yourself that bechachma there's the kayach. He doesn't say Ratzin here. Interesting. He doesn't say desire here. He says the second interpretation. Like when you know you're self-aware that bechachma shebekeach chachmasei leda. Yedias Atzmis shebechachma. The self-awareness within chachma, that you know that the ability, he has the ability to know. V'chein b'chesed, the same thing in chesed. That's nekuda. Usfira, who ayud sfira shebechachma. Here he says ayud, and it's 10. Because at the end it's 10, but with the nekuda it's 10. The 10 spheres in chachma, kamei etzem nekudas haskala, like the etzem nekudas haskala, the actual point. Va'ven b'chachma, which is bina shebechachma, or mida shebechachma. And the motions, and here goes the second interpretation. Oy, he samtus, oy ha'anocha sichlis. Now it's oy.
You thought it was the same level, you said.
No, samtus and anocha sichlis is not. That I know was not. The question was whether it doesn't sound like it's nihi. It looks like it's just different elements. Oy samtus, the resonant. Oy ha'anocha, which we said was more the leg. Now samtus is more the sight and the truth. Hanocha is the resonance. Sichlis. Hanocha sichlis. That's not his samtus.
Those are all colors of Sefirah.
All colors in Sefirah, yeah. Or parts of Biyah, and parts of the 4 dimensions of the Biyah. V'yashlemer histaifus haSeichel. As we said, the derivatives, the branches of Seichel. What are they? V'hein that's Cham. That's Deim Tzemech Chai Medaber in each Sefirah. Shemedaber moved legamri. Medaber is completely separate. V'chai moved l'mitzameach, animal separate from the plant. V'tzameach v'deimim be'erech zelazeh. And plant and daimim are more commensurate, more proportionate to each other.
He didn't explain it yet.
No, there's a big vihine.
Right, okay.
So we finished chapter 145. We finished page 281, 282.